The subjects of our interview today are David Meyers and Winonah Meyers. David Meyers spent most of his professional career as a newspaper photographer and later as a television photographer, producer, and editor at WHIO in Dayton, Ohio. Winonah Meyers spent her professional career in Ohio as a specialist in mental health, but before these two amazing careers is today's story, the story of the Freedom Rides. David and Winonah, welcome to our series in constitutional law and the civil rights movement. David, first, you and Winonah really have a special story, and it begins in college, if not before college.
I came from a very poor family in Indiana. My father was a farmhand. My mother did mostly domestic work. There were 6 children in the family. And when it came time to go to school, we didn't have any money. I applied at several schools, including some of the top schools in our area, Purdue University, DePaul University, Murray State in Kentucky, and a few others, and was accepted at all of them, but I didn't have the money. And in the 50s, they didn't have the loan programs and scholarship programs that are available today. And then I met a man named Gaston F. Lewis, better known as Country Lewis, at a track coaches clinic in in Toronto. And Country somehow took an interest in me, and he asked me where I was going to college, and I told him I wasn't, and he wanted to know why. I told him about the money, and he asked me if I would be interested in going to a school that was mostly black. And he said if I would work 20 hours a week, keep my grades up, be a good student there, he would see to it that I got through college. And that's how I ended up at Central State College in Wilberforce, Ohio, a school founded in 1887 and integrated. It never was segregated by law, but was always black until 1947.
And Winonah, you found your way to Central State University also?
Yes.
Through a different route, born in Cleveland?
Yes, I was born in Cleveland, the oldest daughter of 4 children. My mother was a single parent raising us, and we had no money, and we lived in a culturally and ethnically and racially diverse large city. And it was difficult to find a place that would rent to a working mother with 4 children. We went to many schools in our childhood. As a junior in high school, I remember seeing other juniors filling out applications for college, and I thought that somehow the colleges knew about these persons and sent them applications and said, why don't you come to our school here, fill this out. I had no idea about the process or the accessibility of higher education to the general population. My brother graduated from high school and went to the unemployment office to get a job. And he told the woman, I want to work in the steel mill. They have really good pay and bennies, and that's what I want. And she said, well, we're going to have to test you. So she tested him and called him in and said, you have no business working in a steel mill. You need to be in school. And he said, I have a D average, and I have no money. I'm going to the steel mill. And she said, no, I have a school that would accept you if you can guarantee your effort and if you can work for your room and board. And it's in southern Ohio, and it is mostly black. And he said a school that would accept me is a wonderful thing. So he went to Central State. When I graduated from high school, I had a few scholarship offers. I wanted to be a nurse. I had a full tuition scholarship to St. John's College School of Nursing. And so I took these to my mother, and I was very pleased with myself. And she said, no, I don't think you're going to go into either of these nursing programs. I want you to have a well-rounded education, and I want you to go to a liberal arts college. You can go to Central State University. That's where your brother's going.
I believe really before you become Freedom Riders, it was Central State embracing the two of you that,
Yes.
that made an impact on you.
At that time, Central State had about 1,200 students and about 100 faculty members. And we had, it was like a family situation. After you've been there for a few months, you know every face on campus. And after you've been there a year, you know most of the names too. And we had rather small dormitories. I stayed in one that was all just football players, basketball players, and track runners, and a few baseball players. It was kind of like a brotherhood. Everybody in that dormitory stuck together on everything. Our social life was together most of the time, and a lot of us had our classes together. It was like living with a family. And the faculty was much the same way. We had an extremely well-trained faculty that today could have taught anywhere they wanted. Most of them taught there then because that was the only place they could get a job. For instance, one of my best friends there, and one of my friends after school in Winonah's, her academic advisor, Dr. Leonora Carrington Lane, had a doctor's degree in psychology from the University of Minnesota, had a doctor's degree in education from the University of Chicago. And she had been on the campus there since she was 15 years old. They used to have a high school there. She went to the high school there, went to college there, and then went and got her advanced degrees and came back and spent the rest of her life there.
So Winonah, certainly from the beginning, the college experience at a place like Central State University makes it natural for you to become intensely concerned about civil rights and has some influence on you becoming a Freedom Rider?
Oh, yes. The professors were our teachers, our counselors, our mentors, our heroes. The women on campus were very much engaged in volunteerism and work in the community, and many of them required this of the students, that they become involved and engaged with the community, and that volunteerism was a requirement of someone getting an education. They were all about what you are going to do with what you're learning here, how you are going to bring back and contribute what you have learned.
So the modern rebirth in colleges around the country now of civic responsibility and community engagement is something that you feel is a strong part of your history and one of the better things that colleges and universities are rediscovering.
When I came back to school in my fall of my sophomore year, Dr. Vivian Lewis, head of the Department of Health, Physical Education, and Recreation, and I had no classes under her or in her department at that time. I got a note one day to go to her office immediately. I went there and she said, I understand you've taught she said, I understand you've taught archery in a Boy Scout camp. And I said, yes, I have. And she said, the YMCA in Xenia has asked us to provide them with an archery instructor one day a week in their after-school program on Tuesday afternoons at 3:30. And she said, you're going to do that for us. She didn't ask me. She said, you're going to do that. And she said, and remember, we don't have the best of relationship with the Xenia community. It was mostly white community, and of course the college was mostly black. She said, you go in and teach this class, you do your very best, and remember you're there as Central State College, not as David Meyers.
Now you all have become famous as a part of the students from Ohio and other northern white students who joined the Freedom Rides and have become, in the largest sense, the story of the bond between black students and white students during those rides. I've always felt that your story is special in that regard because it's deeper and goes back to a very unique college experience. But let's now go to the phase of the Freedom Rides and that part of your college life. David, how did the Freedom Rides come to your attention, and how did they become a part of your emerging interest?
Well, it was a thing that emerged a few years earlier, starting with the sit-ins in 1960s. In 1960, the sit-ins started in North Carolina and spread around the country. And although we did not have a lot of segregated facilities such as Woolworths and things like that, we picketed them to put pressure on the Woolworths that were segregated in the South. And we did things such as that. We also had a few places in our area that were segregated. We had a restaurant that did not serve anyone except white people, a very nice restaurant in downtown Xenia. We were just 3 miles outside the city of Xenia. And we picketed that restaurant, and it eventually went out of business rather than serve non-whites. But the big thing was, I had lived, at the time of the Freedom Rides, I had lived 3 years in a dormitory where I'd never had a white roommate. I had only had 2 white teachers in that time. All the rest of my teachers were black, and in most of my classes, there were seldom ever more than 2 white students in a class. Usually, I was the only one. So, and then I think about the people, the teachers I had. And we had a president named Charles Harris Wesley, who was a noted historian. And he, at that time, had published probably a dozen books on black history. This man was a graduate of Fisk University with a master's degree from Yale, a PhD from Harvard, but he couldn't go in Geyer's restaurant in Xenia, 3 miles from his home, and sit down and eat a meal. His granddaughter, who was about 10 or 11 years old at that time, couldn't go to the skating rink in Xenia except on the specific nights for black only. It was for white only some nights and black only other nights. There were all sorts of things like that. And it just seemed ridiculous to me to live in a situation like I did and then walk off the campus and it was a different world. And when the Freedom Rides started, when CORE organized the Freedom Rides, I read about it when it first started and became interested in it and followed it. Everything I could find in any newspaper about it, I would read.
David has always been a reader of the news since he was very young, since he had a very small town newspaper to read. And when he came to Central, he was exposed to a different kind of news.
The black press. On one of my first trips to the college library as a freshman, I looked at some of the newspapers, and there was one entire rack of newspapers that included the Baltimore Afro-American, the Chicago Defender, the Cleveland Call-and-Post, the Pittsburgh Courier, and I discovered a whole new type of news reporting. I would look at the same events that happened, say in Mississippi or Alabama, for instance, stories about the Emmett Till case. You would get an entirely different view of it from the black press than you got from the white press. Lynchings were covered in an entirely different way. Everything pertaining to race or culture was entirely different in the black press. And that's one of the things that really got me excited about the civil rights movement, was seeing it from a perspective that most white people never get to see.
And the courage of those publications was amazing. When you mentioned the Till case, the courage of Jet and Ebony magazine for publishing the accounts of not only the murder, but Emmett Till's funeral.
And only the black
legendary.
press carried the pictures of Emmett Till's face after he had been beaten severely. His mother insisted that his face not be changed and that the casket not be closed. And Ebony and Jet published the pictures of him. And I think that made a world of difference in the views of millions of people throughout the world who saw those pictures.
Winonah, when the Freedom Rides came to your attention, what went through your mind, and how did you get to the point of saying, it's essential that I participate in this aspect of the movement?
Well, we'd been peripherally aware of what was going on. I think the burning of the bus in Anniston was the trigger. It was the thing that grabbed me. I couldn't conceive. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. So then the two Davids were getting together with a group from Antioch College and talking about the Freedom Rides. And as soon as I heard about that, I said, well, this is something that we really have to do. And David said,
No, you're not going.
And he did indeed go.
with David Fankhauser.
Another Central State student.
And you started your ride where and when?
On May 24th, that was Wednesday, the first two buses arrived that day, one Greyhound and one Trailways in Jackson, Mississippi, early in the day, and the people were arrested. And we heard about that on the campus. And several people were talking about it. I had a constitutional law class that day. As soon as the class was over, I told my professor, I said, I think I will be gone for a few days. So we went over to Antioch College and met some of the students there that were involved in the program, and met a professor, Dr. Bobby Johnson, who was a sociology professor and son of a former president of Fisk University. And Bobby got us in touch with Ralph Abernathy. And after making very quick arrangements late that evening, we caught a plane from Dayton to Cincinnati, from Cincinnati to Atlanta, where we stayed overnight on the roof observation deck of the airport, sleeping on benches, and caught an early flight to Montgomery. And we were met by Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth at the airport, who took us to Abernathy's home. And there'd been rioting for 2 nights before that in Montgomery. And when we got to Abernathy's home, it was surrounded by National Guard troops, probably 20 troops. There was a tank nearby. They had machine gun emplacements behind sandbags around the house. And when we arrived there about 7 or 7:30 in the morning. When we went in the house, a very small house that Abernathy lived in, and it had once been bombed and had been rebuilt. And sitting on the couch, watching the morning news and eating their breakfast on their laps, were William Sloane Coffin, who was then chaplain at Yale, Abernathy, and Martin Luther King. And I was just flabbergasted to see those 3 men sitting there together. Went there not expecting to ever meet anyone like that. And I was very enthusiastic from that moment on.
Now, Winonah, you disregarded the interest of the man who came to love you and become your husband, and did go on the Freedom Rides and joined a separate ride. How did you get on that path from Ohio to Mississippi?
I connected with the same persons through Antioch, and I had a friend who lived in the dormitory with me who was willing to go, and another white. The girl in the dormitory was black. And there was another white boy from our school that was willing to go. So we left on the 7th, I believe, of June on bus to Cincinnati and then to Nashville. And we left from Nashville to Jackson by the train. And I just have to say that we were talking about the teachers at our school, the professors at our school. Dr. Leonora Carrington Lane was the one who told us that growth is more than an increase in size, and that the child is the father of the man. And we were introduced to Sartre and Kant, and what can I know? What can I do? How dare I hope? And all of these wonderful ideas and these wonderful people, and this beautiful world was opening up to us through these beautiful people who were bringing us along in terms of engaging us in the community and in self-assurance and in terms of what we can do. What can you do that needs to be done, and learn to do it well and give it back? And so, as David said, these people were in a group that couldn't sit where they wanted to on a bus or go to stop for a cup of coffee, and then the visuals of people trying to get off a burning bus and being beaten with iron pipes as they got off the bus and picking their teeth out of bloody faces. It was something that just grabbed, and it wasn't just people like David and I who were in a minority at a black school. It was young people and older persons all over the country. It was like an explosion, and I can't tell you. It was a different time and a different place. We were shooting the moon. We had the Peace Corps, and after a lot of grumbling, we had Vista, and we had orators and heroes and leaders, persons telling us, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country.
Hank Thomas tells the story that for him, as the young man who was the first one to escape that burning bus, Winonah, white Jews who were at colleges and universities in Ohio, and other white students who came south, who had nothing to gain, one could say, and everything to lose, and who were beaten as badly as they were, then worse, he says in some instances, are his heroes. It's a profound story to me, this bond between black students and white students.
But you were talking about heroes, and my feeling, the real heroes of this whole movement, this part of the movement, this freedom ride, were the young people, the young black students from the South who had everything to lose, not just the day of the ride, not just during their incarceration, but then they had to go back into the community that they were breaching and make nice and belong again, and their parents were risking their employment and often their cars, their houses, their lives, just by being associated with the movement. So these young people, the students, and some of them were even high school students, were to me the real heroes, because they had much more to lose than these young white kids who were coming from all over the country to flood the jails and in the courtrooms.
Now we're on the rides, and we arrive in Mississippi. It was certainly efficient when you faced Mississippi justice, right, for your breach of peace.
First, when we boarded the bus, a group of 6 blacks and 2 whites boarded a bus in Montgomery. We got to the bus station. No one was allowed in the bus station but us. And we went into the white waiting room and sat down, and nobody interfered with us, although the place was surrounded by lawmen outside. We went out and got on the bus, and National Guardsmen in military vehicles, including helicopters, state highway patrolmen in cars, followed us all the way to the Alabama-Mississippi state line, where then Mississippi people took over National Guard and State Highway Patrol, and stayed with us all the way to the Trailways bus station in Jackson. When we got to Jackson, and they were even on the bus. We had guards with fixed bayonets on the gun, on their guns on the Trailways bus with us.
And then what happened when you got off that bus
We got
in
off the
Jackson?
bus, walked into the waiting room, and I had a rather strange thing happen. We all sat down there, and Captain Ray of the police department came along and said, "You'll have to move on," and everyone just ignored him. And he said, "I said move on." And they started taking people by the arm and pulling them out of their seats, putting them in a line, and putting handcuffs on them. But they didn't do me for some reason. I think they did not realize I was a part of the group. So I volunteered. I got up and got in the line as they started to march them out. For one thing, I didn't want to be caught in Jackson, Mississippi alone. I wanted to be with my people, the ones I came with. Anyway, we were taken to the jail and put in individual cells, of course, segregated. There was a white part of the jail and a black part. And we didn't see each other until 9 o'clock the next morning when we went to the municipal court in the same building the jail was in. And when we got into the courtroom, Jack Young, a local attorney, the only black attorney in Jackson, one of only two in the state of Mississippi, took our case. That's the first time we had seen him. And he started to mention something about the racial thing, and the judge immediately said, "This has nothing to do with race. This is purely a breach of peace. These people are charged with creating a situation that could lead to a breach of the peace."
So any reference to the Interstate Commerce Clause or the Boynton
We could not
case?
refer to anything dealing with civil rights or color. Race couldn't be mentioned, civil rights couldn't be mentioned. Only whether or not we intentionally created a situation that could have led to violence. Didn't lead to violence, but could have.
How long was the trial?
Less than 5 minutes.
And the result?
Guilty. And we were all told we either had to pay a $200 fine or spend 60 days in the county jail. But the county jail was pretty crowded by that time because they arrested. We were the fourth bus to be arrested in Jackson, and all of the black prisoners and the female prisoners were put in the county jail, and all of the white male prisoners put in the city jail.
Winonah, same experience?
Yes, only it was better orchestrated by then, better choreography, and it was more like a supermarket kind of thing, and it just flowed, and it flowed beautifully.
But no discussion of your federal rights?
None.
No discussion of the Interstate Commerce Clause? No discussion of Supreme Court law?
Just breach of peace, that was it.
Now, Winonah, the end of your destination is one of the most infamous aspects of the story of Southern resistance. The sentences to Parchman Penitentiary. You spent more time in Parchman than any other female.
We came to Jackson, we were put in the county jail. We were in a cell there were 4 bunks in this cell, and there were 15 to 18 of us in the cell. And so we had wall-to-wall mattresses on the floor. The black women and white women were both in the county jail, but we were not in the same large cell. We had separate large cells. But at some point, we were overflowing their capacity to deal with us. So we were shipped off to Parchman. We were put all on one cell block, at 2 to a cell, and I was in the first cell on the cell block, so I got to see people coming and going. There was nothing that happened that didn't pass our cell. And eventually, all of the cells were full, and then on a regular basis, the women would be leaving. And then I started getting that supermarket feeling again that I had in the courtroom, where it was all so automatic and it just happened so easily. And I heard a lot of the discussions among the jailers, and the jokes and I thought, they think that this is a game that's being played. And I was paying attention to the appeals process. And I knew that we had moving on 100 or so appeals already in the works. I thought, there needs to be just a little footnote historically that this is the price that was exacted by the state of Mississippi for the crime of sitting down in a public train station next to a fellow student of the wrong color.
A part of the communications that you all were able to exchange after this experience includes a special letter from Winonah that tells about how she feels, and I know that letter means a lot to you and says a lot about the Freedom Rides and the cause that you were a part of. Would you maybe start that letter and have Winonah finish it for us?
Okay. Winonah was arrested on June 9th, and I had no idea she had even joined the Freedom Rides and that she was participating. And Heath Rush was a student who was at Central State that was arrested with her. And he was in the cell, they put him in the cell with me the day of his arrest. I was in with about 15 others. And he handed me this letter, and this is the first time I knew that she was not in Ohio. Hi, I am sure that Heath has told you that I am in Jackson. You must know that this isn't something I wanted to do, but rather something I had to do. I'm writing this letter because I want you to understand.
I'm sure that by now you know that there is very little I have found left to believe in. In fact, there is but one thing, and that is human. I believe in the evolutionary concept of man, which implies the relative superiority of man's reason, as well as an infinite potential which he must actualize. It is of the nature of man that he exists as a freedom, a responsibility, and involvement. And so far as man's freedom is complete, his responsibility is concomitantly significant, because man chooses to recognize that he exists, and also through choice recognize the nature of his existence. He is completely responsible not only for what he does, but also for what he is. Thus, man is not only responsible for every situation in which he finds himself, but also for its coefficient of adversity. For it is he who chooses to recognize the nature of the situation as being adverse. This total responsibility possesses the property of extension, in that the action of each self acts either to humanize or dehumanize all of mankind. Therefore, every decision made by the individual is of paramount importance, in that it is made in essence not only for himself, but rather through himself for all of mankind. Hence, man finds that he is innately the personification of an involvement which supersedes any obligation which has been internalized. Because there are those who would misuse their freedom, who would act in such a way so as to inhibit the actualization of man's potential, his reason, who would attempt to rob the human personality of its significance, and because there is a me, free, responsible, involved, I must act to preserve the only thing left for me to believe in, myself through others. Me. P.S. I didn't write to you about this before because I didn't want you to worry about a little insignificant trip.
David, how did you feel when you read that letter?
Well, it's hard to describe. I was disappointed that she had come to Mississippi, because I feared for her safety, as I feared for the safety of all the Freedom Riders. But I was at the same time very proud of her, and very proud of her reasoning on this. I think that I've just read this several times in the last year, I just discovered this a little over a year ago. It had been in a box at home for years. And it amazes me that that was written by a teenager. It's just hard to believe that a teenager could write such a letter.
What is your perspective at this time? I know that you're both very proud of your involvement in the civil rights movement, and I know you feel it has a real legacy. When you talk about it today, what thoughts do you share?
I'm very proud to have been a part of the civil rights movement in the 60s. It was, we changed this country completely. We changed the world. And I didn't realize at the time we were doing that. I had no idea at the time we were doing this that it was of the significance that it was. And I'm just proud I was a part of it. I was never a leader in a civil rights movement. I was a participant. I participated many times other than the Freedom Rides in other activities in Ohio.
Winonah, what would you tell our students about how to pick that torch up and what to do now?
The important thing for young people to know is that they need to come into this world with an attitude of contribution. What is it I can do to contribute to the community, to the nation, to my family, to this earth? What can I do that I love to do, that I have a passion to do, that I can learn to do? And once I've identified it, learn to do it well, and then offer it back to the community as a gift.
I think yours is a truly unique story, and we're proud to have it as a part of our oral history project.